I still like the place that I live at right now because I have everything I want here and a better quality of life than ever before, and also I can just stay in my room, which provides about the same effect as what I'm about to talk about. Alright guys, I'm coming to you back with another video, mostly just a quick one here because I wanted to clarify something that I said in the video which was posted yesterday, which I think has been misunderstood by some due to the way that I communicated it. Um, so the actual fact that I grew up in the forest and in a rural community was like kind of a side note in that video. It wasn't meant to really aid my point in any way or or represent overall what I was trying to say, because the actual infrastructure that I was complaining about was infrastructure that was in supposedly urban or suburban or, middling town type areas, like, you know, bigger cities, smaller cities, and everything in between. I was complaining about the stuff that we had to drive to get to, and how, like, when you got there, it really fucking sucked. It wasn't cool, it wasn't good. Um, and I'm pretty sure I brought up the fact that I was dissatisfied with, like, where I grew up, but I don't actually stand by that dissatisfaction, because every time in recent memory that I've gotten to live in a more rural area again, at least for a period of time, I've felt incredibly good about it, and I've spent a great amount of time longing to go back to where I grew up, because I feel that I didn't really appreciate it until I reached adulthood and actually started living in a lot of these different places. Because right now, I live in a town. You know, there's tens of thousands of people here, and I don't like that. I don't like the social aspect of that. I don't like, obviously, the American infrastructure and so forth, but um, as much as I was heaping praise on European towns and the way that they're structured to house people rather than cars, um, I still didn't like the fact that I was around other people in those places. Like, that's kind of an eternal fact that I can't really escape, is the fact that, you know, other people are around in places that have stuff, and I just don't really like that. I don't really want anything to do with that. Um, I want to be by myself. It feels like that's how I was meant to live, and that's how I was meant to be. It seems like I'm much happier when I do things that way. That being said, I can do that pretty much anywhere. I could live in New York City and just stay in my apartment all the time, which is the exact same thing that I do here. I just stay in my apartment all the time. I don't make an effort to talk to people or to, try and have an interaction, because I'm just not interested in it. It's not something that really appeals to me. Um, Whereas, of course, doing more kind of solitary activities by myself is something that um, brings me joy and is able to bring me some kind of fulfillment. I think other people would describe more loneliness that comes from that. I think perhaps because I'm autistic, or perhaps because of the way that I grew up, I don't really respond in that way. Um, because a lot of rural people, like, they at least go to school or something. I didn't go to school, right? I was in homeschool. I wasn't interacting with anybody outside of my family. The vast majority of my time was spent by myself. And I took a liking to it back then, and I continue to take a liking to it now. So it seems as though no matter where I am, I will live in this kind of way. and I'll choose this kind of lifestyle and prefer that kind of lifestyle. The problem with rural communities is often a lack of public transit or not having trains nearby and these sorts of things. But I mean, I think you could have like a town of 100 people, and as long as those 100 people were like relatively close together, you could have a very small streetcar running through the whole thing, and then you could drive, 15 minutes to get to a light rail line that connects the whole country. I mean, that would really be ideal. Or the whole state in the case of a really big country like mine. And then you just take that to go to like a high-speed rail train, to go to the next state over or something. That's really what would be ideal. I would not want to live in a city really anywhere in the world, and I wouldn't want to live in a town like the one that I live in right now, or even a much smaller town. I don't really want to live around other people. It doesn't feel like that's what I was meant to do. And I think um, that information was kind of lost in that video. Like, I almost make it sound like what I'm interested in is this more social aspect, or what I'm interested in, um, is something other than what I said, which is just the fact that I want beautiful infrastructure. But you don't exactly need beautiful infrastructure when you're in a rural community because you have beautiful nature around you. And so it's like what I was complaining about was a lack of beauty, right? Like the TJ Maxx's and the strip malls and the endless roads and carbon copy suburban homes look really ugly to me. And they did back then. All the hedges, all that shit, the lawns, synthetically produced lawns. I mean, it just looks ugly. None of it looks natural. Whereas at least the buildings that people build in other countries with this more human-centered infrastructure that you can walk to, that you can get to in other ways, where there's not homeless people and undocumented immigrants on every single corner because of the lack of responsiveness by governments from both of our parties. Uh, where you don't have just all this ugliness everywhere. All of the trash everywhere, which is, not as big of a problem as people make it out to be, but it's a big problem in certain places, right? Ironically, it's a lot of the suburban places that have those problems. It just feels like a society in decay, and I think you can partially link that to the type of infrastructure that was being utilized and is being utilized, which keeps things artificially expensive and which locks out certain people, resulting in so many of them having to live out of their cars. Um, it ends up feeling like this really kind of dystopian, inhuman sort of place, and there's an ugliness to that. There's an ugliness to it that I saw when I was growing up, and that was kind of the point of that video. Um, I don't know if it necessarily got through or not. I haven't responded to the comments on that video yet because I've been trying to bring myself to focus, like I just woke up, but I intend to do that pretty soon. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to make this point that I don't have a problem with rural communities. In fact, I would prefer to live in one again. Um, the only things that I would change about rural communities in the US are like how the roads are built. So for example, I think all of the roads in rural areas should have a dedicated protected lane for bikes. Not because everybody would use bikes, but more people probably would if there was an incentive like that, which I think would be good. I think there should be more direct links to um, uh, what I was about to say intercontinental. That's not the word. Um, trains that can either lead you to another train that goes across the country, or at least trains that go across the state. I think there needs to be a lot more rail linkage that link these communities to other communities in the country. You know, not so that you don't still need a car, because you'd still kind of need one, obviously, in a community like that, but you would be less reliant on the car, less dependent on the car, which would definitely bring down costs for families. I mean, think about how many thousands of dollars a year go into just maintaining a vehicle. Never mind the effect that it has on air quality and on the overall beauty of the spaces that we're driving to or in. Um, but again, also just like the dependence factor, you wouldn't have to worry about that as much if rural infrastructure were just tuned a little bit in this way. I mean, you wouldn't even have to build a new road, right? You just take the existing road and then add those protected lanes. Now, sure, you'd have to build new trains and stuff, but like China's able to do it in a couple days, right? Like, what's stopping us from doing it? You know? What's stopping us? And if we let them defeat us on rail, then it's like a domino effect. They get to defeat us on all these other issues. And so I also think from like a from a kind of nationalist perspective, from the perspective of someone who, wants your country to be doing the absolute best, having this sort of infrastructure in place is also important. Um, there's another point I wanted to make. I'm trying to remember what it was. Um, but yeah, I mean, I didn't want to mislead people by mistake into thinking that I dislike rural communities or wouldn't go back to one. That's actually my goal, is to live in a house, secluded from everybody else, rural pilled once again. So hopefully I'll be able to get there in due time. Oh yeah, the other point that I wanted to make real quick as well was that, actually, what was the point? I had it in my head and then I immediately forgot. Oh yeah, I remember now. It was that I didn't appreciate where I grew up very much. I think partially because of the grass is always greener thing that humans experience. But I also think the reason I didn't appreciate it was because of the family situation I was in at the time, the fact that I didn't really have much independence, and um, ended up facing a lot of challenges mentally because I didn't understand a lot of things, um, and ended up being, more unhappy as a result of that, like, latent neuroticism and the various personal challenges I was going through. And those things led me to not appreciate exactly where I grew up, um, as much as I think I would have otherwise. And once again, the place where I grew up is not what I was criticizing in that video. It was the places that you'd have to drive 10, 15 miles to get to from where I grew up, and then you get there and it would be so ugly. That's what I was complaining about. But the fact that I was dissatisfied overall was kind of a minor, irrelevant point, because the thing that led to me being overall dissatisfied wasn't those, areas that were relatively far from me. It was what I was going through at home, not the environment around me, like outside. So hopefully that clears things up.